Right, the Cryptex so far. So far it comprises 4 rings, or 4 tumblers rather, 2 end rings and an inner central tube. So the end rings, if I can show it well, have this ring all around them, and they have that groove cut in. That's for a pin that sticks up. This is, think of a bike lock, a bike combination lock. The pin that sticks up and goes through there when it's in the right place. Before it's in the right place, it's here. So if it's here and it's fixed to the internal tumbler tube, you can't pull the tube out because that pin is against the wall until you move to the right letter, and then it slops into there and it can go. So that's one end ring. You notice there's a little white dot. That gave me fun, just cutting a piece of very tiny wood and making a hole to put that in. And there's the other end ring. That white dot is a bit more noticeable. It looks uneven, but it's only because there's a bit sticking out here that's going to eventually nestle inside the handle, the right hand handle. And that's, again, it's got the groove and it's got this recess. This has got a recess. So putting it together so far. So there's the end ring that gets glued onto the end of the central tube, and then it gets glued in such a way that those lines there, can't see them very well now, I've rubbed them out, but there's 2 lines about 1/4 of an inch apart. I have to cut that piece out, make a slot, because there'll be another tube that goes on the inside that has 4 pins, and those pins have to stick through that slot. So this by the way, this on this one, that's only for lining up purposes. It's not used in the lock itself. That little notch, it's not used in the lock itself. It's only for lining up purposes. So if I put that on, before I do that, this is number what? That's number 4. So let's turn them upside down. So each ring, each tumbler ring, once again has the slot cut in it. Trying to find a place so you can see it. So there's the little notch cut in it. It's recessed with a 55mm drill, and then cut all the way through with a 45mm drill. And on the other side there's a little projection, little ring, little polo mint, and that is for the next ring to latch onto, like that. Slightly sloppy, it's wood. When you put it all together it's less sloppy because it holds itself in place. So yeah, so when you put those 2 together, you can see that there's a groove now in there. So the needle that I've got there is in that groove. So there'll be a pin sticking out from the central tube that eventually is rubbing on that ring, and then eventually when you get the ring in the right place, it goes into that groove and can come through. Until then it's stuck behind that bit, and that's, you have to be very careful trying to get the dimensions for that, as you want as little tolerance as possible. So there's the end ring on the tube. Now bearing in mind it's so difficult at the moment because it's all moving. This will be glued. That end ring is glued to that tube and the slot is cut in. So the rings are numbered and I want to put them on the right way. Four. That's got to be 3. Right. So number 1 ring goes on with the recess this side, goes on there and latches onto the little projection ring, little ring that's projecting on the central, the inner tube. So that's number 1 ring, and number 2 ring number 3, number 4. And if I've lined them up, I should be able to get a knitting needle through all of those bits. Let's put the end ring on. Once again, the end ring is glued on. The end ring, both end rings get glued onto that central tube. So that ring glued onto the central tube, that ring glued onto the central tube. And when you get the numbers right, or when you get the letters or whatever lined up correctly, it's so difficult to hold this, it really is. I'm trying to line them up so I can just push that knitting needle through. And I can't see, I haven't got a clue with numbers because I haven't put them on yet. Right, they're nearly there. Every time I touch one bit, it wants to move another bit. I wonder if that's done it. Right, so there we are. That's just lining up all those grooves so that the pins, come on, focus, right, so that the pins that stick up from the inner tube through that slot can go into those recesses once the tumbler is moved. And then 2 handles out of purple heartwood, handle on each end. Got to trim that appropriately, but purple heartwood handle on each end. And once again, that recess or that little projection there is just to sort of line it up on the handle. So it's a fairly intricate project. Did I mention earlier on about, yeah I did, didn't I, about the little white dots? So I have to get it all lined up with those little white dots. Got to put all the markings on. Okay, that'll do.